The Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, Preaxer and Cotegra fungicides, and Cruiser Max Vibrance beans.
Bernard Tobin here on the Soybean School. Today I am joined by Dr. Shawn Conley from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Shawn, how's it going?
Great, Bernard. Like I said earlier, I'm not where I'm typically at this time of year. I'm usually in a soybean field, but my family and I just got back from Spain. I was on sabbatical for 6 months, and I'm on COVID watch. So for 2 weeks, I'm in my basement. So that's where my office is for 2 weeks.
Well, we hope everybody's doing well. And as I say, you can't get away from us, so we got to talk soybeans. How about that?
That sounds great.
Hey, the last time you and I talked, actually, it was at the SWAC conference in Ontario, 2019, and we talked about the impact of planting soybeans earlier. And today I want to talk about the impacts of early planting, specifically on flowering. And typically, growers think summer solstice, June 21st, for the onset of flowering. But does that rule of thumb still apply, when we're planting soybeans in April and early May?
Yeah, that's a good question, Bernard. I mean, we've actually been seeing this, pop up on Twitter the last few years. So my grad students and we kind of dug into this question. And what we found is that when we're planting soybean early, remember, soybean is a short day plant, which means that flower induction occurs when the when the night is longer. So by planting our soybeans earlier, we're actually triggering flowering induction as the days start getting longer. So we're actually triggering on the front end, where typically when we used to plant soybeans, we were triggering on the back end. So that's what we're seeing here. And we also have to remember, as we move further north, i.e. Ontario, into Canada, Wisconsin, these earlier maturity group beans are less photoperiod sensitive to begin with, too. So there's got two different things in play, if you will, which causing these soybeans to flower earlier than we typically saw before.
Let's talk about, obviously flowering earlier. What are the benefits of flowering earlier? Can we go too early, or, anytime you can increase, a growing season and pod fill is not a bad thing?
That's right. That's one of the cool things that we've noticed. We did some research over time. We found that today's modern genetics, we've actually bred the plant to flower earlier. So we're actually losing a week on the front end. So we have a week less vegetative time period. And we've added 2 weeks, anywhere from 7 to 14 days, on the reproductive end. And that's what really has helped increase our soybean yield. So breeders, unbeknownst to them, have made some modifications to soybean physiology over time. And then we add into that our management factors of planting earlier. We've actually extended the grain fill period, which is good for us, i.e. soybean, because obviously it's different than corn, because it flowers for up to 6 weeks. And it gives us more plasticity for increasing soybean yield, or more time to increase that soybean yield with our earlier planting, and pushing maturity groups later and later, as we've seen in Ontario and Wisconsin as well.
What about, challenges, Shawn? I mean, we're going early in our flowering. Do we run to disease? Do we run risks in that area?
We do, because generally when we plant earlier, we're getting a quicker vegetative growth and canopy closure, specifically for those farmers that have battled white mold. And we really have to, be conscious of that and understand that we can't spray by calendars. So we have to, if we were planting earlier, we need to make sure we're out there scouting and getting our fungicides applied in a timely manner, because that R1 timing is when we really need to be putting that fungicide out there for managing white mold. And on the other side, in the States, we really have to watch that window for post-emergent herbicide applications based on growth stage. So we have these timelines. We really have to understand if flowering is occurring earlier, that we need to get the herbicide out there earlier, so we're not off-label on that. So there's more management that growers need to think about if they're planting earlier, because of that initiation or induction of flowering earlier in the growing season.
Hey, final question for you, and that's the weather, and obviously here in Ontario, and in a lot of parts of the U.S., it's been a really, really hot and dry late June into July, a very significant hot period. What impact can we see with early flowering when we get into this type of stressful condition?
Yeah, that's another good question, Bernard. And what we've really seen is, again, one of the, I don't want to say advantages of soybean over corn is that with corn, you have a very short window. When you have pollination, if it's hot and dry during that pollination, you basically got a week. Where on the soybean side, again, we can flower for up to 6 weeks. So if we lose some flowers early due to flower abortion, then, we have that capacity to add flowers at the end or continue to add flowers. Because remember, we can abort up to 70% of the flowers the soybean puts on to begin with. So I think it's just important to note that we might see some flower abortion early, but again, a little drought at R1, if you will, isn't as bad as a drought and hot weather for R1 on the corn side. And it helps growers maybe save a little bit of money with that they won't have to apply a fungicide for white mold. So that's something else to think on the positive side. As long as it's just a short-term dry period, we still have the end of the season, the capacity to add flowers, add to these multiple nodes we're putting on for planting earlier and overcoming some of these challenges during the early flowering that we're seeing in soybean right now.
Right. Hey, Shawn, great stuff. Really appreciate you taking the time. Taking some time during your convalescence there to join us. Be safe, be healthy, and we'll catch you in a crowd one of these days.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. And if anyone has any further questions, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'm at BadgerBean, or my webpage is www.coolbean.info. Thank you, Bernard.